Welcome to the Goddard Report. Comments made on the Goddard Report and TalkDigitalNetwork.com are an expression of opinion only. Here is Jim Goddard.
My guest is Jeff Berwick, better known as the Dollar Vigilante. Welcome to the show, Jeff.
Thanks, Jim. Good to talk to you again.
You have a major announcement to make for us today.
Yeah, as you know, I've been on your program many times. You know I'm very anti-government. I consider the government to be evil, and more than that, I consider it to be an unnecessary evil. But I've come to the conclusion that if we're going to try to spread liberty and freedom more, that we have to get involved in the political system. So I've gone against many of my things that I'm against, as government is. I'm against it. I've gone against that, and I'm actually running for the upcoming election in October for the Libertarian Party of Canada in Vancouver Centre.
And who's that up against?
I don't even know. I've never done this before. I have no idea what's involved. I've apparently got some people running my campaign who are looking into who I'm running against right now. I really just decided this week to do it. But I'm really excited about it. I think there's a lot of change coming, and there's a lot of people waking up to the fact that the government is causing most of the problems we have today, and but they still don't really know what to do about it. And we saw that in Alberta this week or last week when they elected a full communist government in the conservative state of Alberta, and it's just goes to show you that people are just, they don't know what to do. They know there's a problem, but they don't know how to fix it. And I think the Libertarian Party, with their platform of just increasing freedom and reducing the size of government in every facet, is the answer. And so I'm running for the election in October.
Now, Jeff, are you a Canadian citizen?
Yes, I am. I was born in Canada. I'm not a resident right now. I am aware that you have to be a resident to run. They apparently file the writ in September, and at that point, if I'm going to run, I have to become a resident again, and that is something I really didn't want to do for tax reasons. And but I am willing to do everything I can to spread freedom, and so I'm willing to do this for that reason.
Now, you've checked out the real estate prices in Vancouver, haven't you?
Yeah, I definitely won't be buying. I'll be renting. Actually, I don't even know how much time I have to spend up there, and hopefully it's not too much because I prefer to be in Mexico where it's a lot freer, but I'll try to do whatever I can to spread freedom and increase freedom for all Canadians as much as I can in that position.
Jeff, you've always been an advocate that people should leave Canada and live elsewhere. Where are you now?
I'm in Acapulco, Mexico. I've sort of lived down here for about 6 years, and as I mentioned, I just find it to be the freest country by far in North America. Nothing even comes close, and I'm all about freedom. I'm a lover of freedom, a spreader of freedom, and so that's why I prefer to spend most of my time down here.
Now, of course, we hear all kinds of tales about drug cartels rolling heads into nightclubs and so on. Is Acapulco full of crime like that?
No, the media really likes to make Mexico look as dangerous as possible. There definitely is some problems down here, and then all the problems are caused by government, by the U.S. war on drugs, and the government here making drugs illegal for sale. It's actually not illegal to have, but it's illegal for sale, and it causes a lot of cartel-related problems. And the cartels, of course, are just entrepreneurs trying to get a product from a willing voluntary seller to a willing voluntary buyer. And of course, when government gets involved, it messes things up. But no, absolutely not. I live in Acapulco, which in 2011 was rated the fourth most dangerous city in the world. And I was here and I didn't notice any problems. It's way overblown what they say.
And it's like, I guess, so many other problems. It's easier to look at the negatives than the positives.
Yeah, that's, people seem to be attracted to the negatives a lot. And of course, that's what the media is really there for. CBC is there to make Canadians scared of the world. To give allegiance to their government, to think that the government is what makes anything good in their life happen, when it's not. It's actually the reason why most bad things happen. And so, yeah, the media, you really just have to turn off the television. The mainstream media all around the world is quite propaganda channel for the government for the most part, and it's just trying to spread fear. And it just, first of all, it's not true, and secondly, it's just not healthy to just watch fear porn all day.
Well, I was going to say there were riots in London following the election of the Conservatives, but the police asked the mainstream media to not film it or report it, so they didn't. And so for most people, they didn't realize that there was violence, or at least demonstrations that turned a little rowdy after the election of the Conservatives in Britain.
Yeah, the media always tries to show its one angle, and that's why it's so dangerous, because it's always showing a really bad angle. It's showing all the really bad things, and not showing you any of the good things that are happening. And we saw that in Baltimore as well, where there was, I think, hundreds of thousands of people who showed up to a very peaceful protest during the time when they were having some of those riots. And that was not shown on any media. So they always try to find the worst things and show that. But thanks to the internet now, and thanks to people like yourself on your program, and you actually talk about the truth, that people are starting to really realize that what you see on the mainstream media is not the truth, and it's mostly propaganda. And I think I just saw a poll just the other day that said that of Americans, 2% of young Americans actually think the mainstream media is telling the truth. 2%. Like, that's not even a rounding error it could be 0%. So people are really waking up thanks to the internet. And that's a big part of the reason why I'm doing what I'm doing with the Libertarian Party is I want to spread even more of these ideas and knowledge about what's true and what really works for the most humans possible, which is freedom, and what is the biggest problem in most people's lives, which is government and central banks.
How many mainstream media outlets have contacted you about your candidacy?
We just announced it, and because I have a long relationship with you, I contacted you first to give you the scoop. But I'm probably going to be doing a number of interviews. I don't know if I'll get on the mainstream, although I am good friends with one of the top people at CBC. He used to work for me as my VP of marketing, so I might get in there. But we'll see what happens. But we're just going to get out there and start talking more. A lot of the people who really believe in liberty and freedom, they don't vote, they don't get involved in the political system for understandable reasons, because they don't like it. They think it's an evil system. But it is a soapbox that we can get up on, as Ron Paul showed. Ron Paul really expanded libertarianism and the ideas of freedom in the U.S. More than anyone in the last decade, just because he was running for president.
And what message does he have that you would share?
Ron Paul?
Yes.
Well, he has sort of two different messages. When he's speaking in front of cameras, he tones things down a bit, but I agree with him basically on almost everything that I think he stands for, which is total freedom. He once actually said that he thinks anarchy is a great idea. He said that if people actually took responsibility for their own lives, that'd be great. And I agree with him. I think the more that we have less government, the better. And that's what he was for. He was known as Dr. No. He voted no against every spending bill that was put in front of him. And that is exactly what I would plan to do if I was elected as well.
Do you think that we rely on governments too much?
Well, I think most people do, yes. And I think it's unnecessary, and that's the sad part. People need to realize that government is really just like communism. If you don't like communism, you shouldn't like government, because communism is essentially central planning of things and all things. And the government is a central planning of the things that it does. So everything that the government does, that's a central plan. And of course, most people realize the free market is where things are amazing. There's competition, and people are competing for better services at lower prices all the time. That's what the free market's all about. Whereas government is all about increasing its budgets constantly, and that's why we're seeing all these governments, including the Canadian government, go massively into debt. Unsustainable debt, so they're going to have to default at some point, and I think it's coming very soon in the U.S. And so it's really about getting rid of government as much as possible. And I think people don't realize how they really just don't need it, or in any way. If you look at even policing, I wrote an article about this recently in Baltimore. I said the answer to police brutality is to privatize the police. And a lot of people might think that's crazy because they haven't heard the idea before, but there is private security, private police organizations in the U.S. doing a great job. In Detroit, there's Threat Management Center. They are a private security, private policing firm. They've been in operation for 20 years. They have a number of clients, and they've never had any of their clients ever get hurt during that entire period of time. And none of their officers have gotten hurt, and I don't think they've even really hurt any of the criminals who are attacking their clients. And a lot of people will say, well, what about the poor people? They can't afford to pay for their own private security. And in threat management in Detroit, they actually give away their services to people who can't afford it because they make a good profit from the clients who do pay for it.
We'll have more with Jeff Berwick right after this.
More and more people are looking to the internet for intelligent, riveting, and thought-provoking interviews. To advertise on the Goddard Report and TalkDigitalNetwork.com, call 604-699-8600, 604-699-8600.
In Goddard we trust.
Welcome back. We're speaking with Jeff Berwick, newly announced candidate for the Libertarian Party in Vancouver Centre. Well, out of nowhere, you're going to be challenging politicians who have been doing this for a long time. You're brand new at it. How do you think you'll fare?
Well, I'm going to have to learn how to lie. First of all, no, I'm just kidding. I'm not going to lie, but that's essentially what they do. I think one thing that people really realize when they listen to politicians on TV, they don't really talk like regular human beings. They've got this sort of this pattern, this structure to how they talk, and they don't really talk like a human being. So I just plan to be myself and talk about the issues from my own heart and from what I see and from my own knowledge and experience. And I'm hoping that people will catch on to it. And actually, I think we just announced it. It's already a lot of excitement about it. So we're going to see what happens. I'm quite curious to see what does happen because I think, as I mentioned, the world is ready for a change. They just don't know what to change to, and that's what I'm hopefully going to try to help people understand is that almost all of our problems today that most people have is caused by government and central banks, and we need to reduce or remove them completely if we can. But I know that's going to take time, but to definitely reduce it as much as possible.
How do you feel about things like centralized medical care, government medical care, or fire departments?
Well, I definitely think central planning of anything is terrible, and for that reason, I think that socialized medicine is terrible. And I know from personal experience with my own mother, she was actually paralyzed when she took the swine flu vaccine from her doctor. And she couldn't even get to see a doctor after she was paralyzed from the waist down for about 8 months. So I was talking to her saying, let's fly you down to Mexico. We can be in the best hospitals around in a few minutes. And it's actually not even that expensive because it's a private market down here. So the Libertarian Party of Canada, of course, has its sort of a platform. And the Libertarian Party's platform is to repeal the Canadian Health Act. And to actually revert control of healthcare to the provinces. So I'm okay with that because that is actually decentralizing to some extent to the provinces. And hopefully we can decentralize it to the point over time where it gets down to each individual person is responsible for their own healthcare. And then they can have options on the market, can compete for their services, and there'll be fairly cheap insurance for people who want to buy insurance, all offered by the private market. So as far as healthcare, as I mentioned, that's the libertarian stance on it, is to repeal the Canada Health Act and to give control to the provinces. As for fire departments, it's kind of interesting. Tim Moen, who's the president of the Libertarian Party, he actually was a fireman, and he quit his job, I believe, as a fireman to become Libertarian Party of Canada leader. So he's all for private fire agencies. Everything the government does can be done by private markets. I'm not sure if the Libertarian Party has a platform or a stance on fire departments, but I know that all the goals of the Libertarian Party is to decentralize things as much as possible. So I imagine that the stance on fire departments would be I don't even know if that is nationally run or provincial or city, but if it is nationally run, it should be run by the provinces, and if it's run by the provinces, it should be run by the cities, and so on, decentralized.
Well, of course, in Vancouver, we've seen the federal government close down the busiest Coast Guard base in the country. Would you still have a Coast Guard?
Well, there's my personal opinions, and then there's the Libertarian Party's opinions. The Libertarian Party, I believe, is fine with protection from outside forces. So I think that would be generally the stance. I don't think people are ready for not having a military like they have in Costa Rica or anything like that. But definitely there's no need for the Canadian military to be going around the world and attacking people in places like Afghanistan or Libya and just heinously and horribly doing so. I know the propaganda is that they're going over there to free people. If you see what's going on over there, no one's free and most people are dead. So there's nothing honorable or good about doing that. And I know that would be Ron Paul's stance as well, is that to have if you're going to have an army, to not have it be outside of your own borders. It's there for protection. Is
that where most of the problems start, the outside aggression? Because then it gets everybody else mad at you too, doesn't it?
Yeah, well, if you look at most wars throughout, especially the 20th century, they were actually all started essentially through a lie. And both sides are always backed by the central banks. That's why central banking is so evil. So even in World War II, Germany was backed by the Rothschild central banks, and then all the people on the other side, the U.S. and the others, all their central banks were behind them, and they were just printing up money. World War I started in 1914. In 1913, the Federal Reserve was initiated. It was founded in 1913. So 1 year later, there was a world war. Ron Paul says that it's no accident that the century of total war was the century of central banking. And so I think the problems actually stem from central banking, because governments can't afford to go around the world and attack other people if they can't print money. And people won't put up with it very long if they actually see it in their taxes going up directly. They get their Iraq invasion and their Libyan bombing check in the mail every month. People will say, I don't want to pay for this. And so I think the real problem is central banking, and that's the real reason behind most war.
What's your position on the war against drugs?
Again, my position is the Libertarian Party's position. The Libertarian Party, I'm just looking it up. I'm trying to learn them all right now. Where does it say about the war on drugs? The Libertarian Party of Canada would end the war on drugs by decriminalizing the consumption and possession of drugs. So yes, that's exactly what I would want to see done. The war on drugs, as we talked about even earlier, has been heinous. It's killed millions of people. That's insane. Over some plants that some people voluntarily want to put in their own bodies. People should have control of their own bodies. So obviously, to make any substance illegal is heinous, and it's actually an act of aggression against those people, because if you just have a marijuana plant in your yard, that is not initiating force against anyone. That's not hurting anybody at all. And to have people with guns go in there and put you in a cage because you had it is insane. And this war on drugs needs to end. And luckily it is already starting. This is actually one of the top topics of this upcoming election, is legalization of drugs. So it's good. The public is finally waking up to how evil and horrible it is for humanity to have this war on drugs.
Well, Portugal would be a good example of that. They decriminalized all drugs, and since then their crime rate has dropped, I believe, in half. Their addiction rate has dropped tremendously, and of course that has saved the nation so much, both socially and monetarily. Yeah,
absolutely. If you think about it, it's quite insane, and we're seeing in the U.S. that as they're starting to decriminalize or at least legalize marijuana in the U.S., it's actually causing a lot of the police departments to be complaining about it, because they say that there's not really much to do if we're not out there busting people who have plants in their houses, which is insane. And so that's really the opposition, for the most part, to ending the war on drugs, is the police. And the government is also involved in the drug trade. The CIA is the biggest transporter of drugs worldwide. That's a big part of what Afghanistan was for, was to take control of the biggest opium fields in the world, and they transport those. So it's crazy. All these things to do with the war on drugs is crazy. Just like alcohol prohibition was crazy. And you just look in the 1930s, what happened when they made alcohol illegal? There was headless bodies in the street everywhere because they drove it underground. And lots of people got killed or put in jail if they had beer. And that might sound crazy to you, but that's the exact same thing with the drug war and what it's doing. There's no difference between alcohol and drugs. In fact, alcohol in many ways is worse than most drugs.
Well, you look at the neighboring suburb of Surrey to Vancouver, they now have a shooting every night, and it's a war between two different drug gangs.
Yeah, it causes just insanity. It causes chaos and violence and murder. All for nothing. And even worse, there would be so much profit and more people would profit if it was all legalized or decriminalized, because right now what you have is, as you pointed out, because it's all underground, people, can't use things like courts. So if you're one drug provider and then there's another one and he promised you he was going to do something, he didn't do it, you can't take him to court and get reparations. You pretty much have to handle it yourself, and a lot of the times it ends up in violence. And so it's just totally crazy. And because of that, the people who really profit, it's a very small amount of people. It's just really the people at the top. Whereas if it was legalized and decriminalized, you would see entire industries. The marijuana industry would be billions. It already is a billion-dollar industry from what I can tell, legally, from just what they've done with medical marijuana. And that provides all kinds of jobs for farmers, for transportation, for all kinds of things. And then people can get a part of the wealth of, just people who enjoy this plant. So, ending the drug war to me is one of the biggest, the best things that we can do right now, to improve our lives on Earth, because, that's the main reason they use for so many things. Like, why do we need cops on every corner who are quite often, beating up people or extorting them? Why do we need that? And a lot of people say, well, it's because the war on drugs. We have to be out there looking for people on drugs. It's totally insane. I like to compare it to firefighters. Firefighters, they never leave the fire station unless there's a fire. I think the police should be, at minimum, the same way. They should be only out there when they're called. They shouldn't be going around trying to find people doing something that is illegal, which, of course, today there's so many things that are illegal that you can almost say just going too fast or going too slow or not stopping completely in a place where they told you to stop completely. So it's insane, and we live in a total police state because of it.
How soon before we see you standing on a soapbox in Vancouver telling people to vote for you?
That's a good question. Right now we're planning a cross-Canada Liberty train or bus tour that we're intending to do in July. This is just in the planning stages right now. So I'll probably be up there in Canada in July, which if I have to be up in Canada, that's definitely one of the months I prefer to be there. And so I'll be up there for that, and we'll see. I'm really just going with the flow. We'll see what kind of response there is. If people want me to come up for debates, I'll do that. So I'm very open. I sort of left my schedule open for the next 5 months, for, anything that needs to be done to spread the cause of freedom in Canada.
Of course, Jeff, a lot of the things you're talking about could get you into trouble under the government's new Bill C-51 anti-terrorist bill, because you're talking about, well, how about we don't use the government? Yeah,
that's what they're trying to do with these terrorism things now. They even, it was the prime murderer, prime sinister of the United Kingdom, was in the UN talking about how people talking about these sort of topics that we're talking about right here, no one's getting hurt, there's no problems. They want to call them terrorists, and that's what C-51 is about too, which is a heinous, horrible. I can't believe that passed. I can't believe Canadians aren't in more of an uproar. But they did, at least some people did try to stop it. But you can't stop these things with these people in power. That's why we have to get these sort of people, which is everyone in the government today, out of power and get in as many freedom-minded and rational and decent, morally sound people into the government to try to slow the growth of this disease, this cancer that continues to grow.
It is hard to support a bill that allows police to use any method to question you except rape and murder.
Well, that was nice of them not to make it so they can't rape you. Yeah, it's crazy. All these things are crazy. And it's really sad that people have let it get to this point. But there is some hope that we can sort of slow down at least the growth of government and it becoming a total police state in Canada. There's not much difference now between Canada and the U.S. in terms of the police state. Although the U.S. is still worse, but it's just getting worse and worse, and it's not going to end up going down a road that anyone's going to enjoy. This is not good. We need to reduce these sort of things as much as possible, not increase them.
Of course, the government is going to say we have to stop organizations like ISIS because they're out to kill us. Are they?
Well, first of all, let's ask who is ISIS. Hillary Clinton has already said that they essentially founded or formed ISIS. So when they were in Syria, when they were they're actually doing terrorist attacks in Syria. They killed about 3,000 people with a gas attack. NATO or the CIA or the U.S. government, the same old cast of characters. So what's going on over there? I'm not even totally sure, but I know that the U.S. government caused it, and you just see almost every week they accidentally airmail drop weapons and tanks and supplies to ISIS. And almost weekly they accidentally do that. And I think after a certain period of time, you have to question who is exactly helping who here.
Of course, as long as there's a boogeyman, it's easy for the government to say we have to do things.
Yeah, that's been sort of what they've been trying to do now for decades. The Project for a New American Century was saying that, and that's people like Dick Cheney and Paul Wolfowitz and all these evil people, Donald Rumsfeld, they have this warped or strange or bizarre mindset that the way to have a strong country is to always have an enemy. So after the Cold War, which really wasn't much of a war at all, it was mostly media and propaganda saying they were the enemy. There really wasn't too much of that. And then that ended, so they had nothing, and so they looked and they said, well, we're gonna have to do terrorism, and we'll say it's Islamic people, so we have an enemy in the Middle East constantly, just like in 1984, they're always at war, and war is peace. This is for freedom. So yeah, you really have to just, turn off your TV. The TV is going to tell you what the government wants you to think, which is that ISIS is a terrible organization that's going to end up beheading you at some point if we don't send people over there to bomb people in their houses constantly. It's crazy, just like everything the government does.
Jeff, thanks a lot for chatting with us.
Thank you, Jim.
Looking forward to seeing your election signs popping up on lawns.
Yeah, that'll be interesting.
It will be. Thank you very much for chatting with us again.
All right, thank you, Jim.
Our guest has been Jeff Berwick, better known as the Dollar Vigilante. You're listening to the Goddard Report on TalkDigitalNetwork.com, a copyright performance. Find us on Twitter at TalkDigitalNet. Questions for our show can be sent to info@howstreet.com, and also check out our YouTube channel, Talk Digital Network. I'm Jim Goddard.
Comments made on the Goddard Report and TalkDigitalNetwork.com are an expression of opinion only. The Goddard Report is available online and mobile at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. The Goddard Report is a production of How Street Media Incorporated.